Thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to be here today. I stated it when I was campaigning that you are not the forgotten borough, but the unforgotten borough. And I have been here on Staten Island a number of times, and I just enjoy the ferry ride. It allows you an opportunity to just sit down and relax. I think it's one of the really underestimated ways of commuting here in the city. And so we are really excited today. I'm joined by my colleagues, former colleagues in government, particularly Debbie Rose, former council person, real trailblazer in her own right, to just really have the vision of, how we should lift up this important community here. But I'm also joined by our DOT commissioner, my good friend Adonis Rodriguez, and representatives from Vito Fosella's office, as well as I'm sure Council Member Savina Brooke Powers will be joining us, Councilwoman Camilla Hanks as well. We also have Julie Moody Lewis, president of Sandy Ground Historical Society. As I was coming across the ferry and earlier this morning, I was reading about this important community that's here on Staten Island that I think that we should insure your mom's book, and we should make it as reading material for all of our young people. And I'm happy to be here with the Executive Director of Sandy Ground Historical Society, Sevilla D'Alessandro, and the New York Sector Commander of the U.S. Coast Guard, a history maker herself, Captain Zita. Just this whole team of folks that have come out today to be part of this amazing commissioning of the Sandy Ground Staten Island Ferry. This is the first Staten Island Ferry named to honor the rich history of Black New Yorkers living on Staten Island. And the amazing Senator Diane Savino joins us. And it's so fitting. This is the way we should close out Black History Month, by doing something that's important to recognize this rich history on Staten Island. Many of us would not have realized Staten Island has such an important moment in our history. Sandy Ground was the first free Black community in this region, this area, prior to Staten Island becoming part of New York City. Nearly 200 years ago, in 1828, Staten Island was not part of the city, and this was a community where many Blacks came to be free and to also carry out their necessary trade. We believe that these young and new arrivals of Blacks, they came to the South Shore community of Roseville and set up shops, set up businesses, and continue to grow. Other Black Americans arrived here because of the rich soil. It became a farming community here in the area with many great producers of food, but also blacksmiths and oyster men, something that many of us don't know about now. Staten Island had a very rich oyster community back then. And the booming oyster trade allowed them to own their own properties and be a part of this thriving community. And I want to take my hat off to the first ferry boat operator, Captain John Jackson. He became the first Black person to own property on Staten Island. This is just some powerful history that I think is imperative that our young people know. Sandy Ground also served as one of the stops on the Underground Railroad. It was a place that allowed Blacks, as they were fleeing some of the slavery conditions in the South, to find freedom through the Underground Railroad. And it was imperative that this community was something that defined the pride, the resiliency, and the pursuit of freedom. And so I'm really proud to stand here today with some of the descendants of the Sandy Ground settlers and all of Staten Island today as we do this important commission. And it's good to be here with Captain Zita and her pioneering in the Coast Guard and all of those who play a role in the commissioning of this ferry. Captain Zita was the first black woman to be port commander of New York Harbor, a very significant title. And so as we commission this state-of-the-art ferry, we're also uplifting and commissioning the past and the future as we have our young people here who have employed it so loudly, so we want to thank you. So this is a transformative time for Staten Island recovery. We believe the recovery is going to lift all ships on the island to move us in the right direction. So I want to thank, again, Debbie Rose, who had this vision, being the first African-American to be elected on Staten Island, continuing to pave the way for so many here on the island. She launched a petition drive to name the ferry after the Sandy Ground community. It was a great idea then, and it's a great idea now, and we want her partnership and continuation with Councilwoman Camilla Hanks allowed this to happen. And so we are happy to do this and to be a part of this important announcement today. So I want to bring up the Staten Island Borough Commissioner, Commissioner Cariano. That was good. Cariano, right? Cariano. Everybody butchers your name, right?
My husband's name, not mine.
Go on, Commissioner.
Hey, thank you. Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon, everyone. I am Roseanne Caruana, New York City DOT's Staten Island Borough Commissioner, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the commissioning of the newest Staten Island ferry, the Sandy Ground. Yes, it is my great honor to host the second commissioning ceremony for the newest Alice-class boats. Just to be clear, a commissioning ceremony is when a boat has been declared safe and seaworthy and officially becomes New York City's property. It cannot be said enough how extremely proud I am of the Department of Transportation and the team at the Staten Island Ferry for making this day's event come to fruition. The Staten Island Ferry is extremely important to Staten Islanders, and we'd like to call it our golden ticket to the world. This new boat will carry millions of passengers from Staten Island and Manhattan and will serve as a vast reminder to honor the historic Sandy Ground settlement as it passes another symbol of freedom in the harbor, Lady Liberty. Few logistics before we start. Please remember masks are required to be worn in the terminal as well as when we tour the boat. At this time, I would like to ask Juliana, a descendant of the Sandy Ground settlement, to please come up and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. So cute. Come on up. We're going to try to get this down.
Yeah, we're going to try to get this down as quick.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
To the Republic.
And to the republic, which stands one nation, under God, and liberty, justice for all.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you, Juliana. Thank you, Juliana. At this time, I would like to welcome our DOT Commissioner, Adanis Rodriguez, who will dedicate the ferry's plaque. Commissioner?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to all members of the DOT for the great job that they do, keeping this great ferry clean, safe, not only for the residents of Staten Island, but for all New Yorkers and the visitors. So thank you for the job and keep doing work. Thank you so much, Commissioner Carrana, and of course, Mr. Mayor, for your leadership, not only in this initiative, but with all the initiatives that you've been showing throughout the city, and I can say throughout the nation. It is great to be back here at St. George Terminal. This is my very first ferry commissioning ceremony as DOT commissioner. I love this new boat. They had new computer, they had new technology, and talking to the captain, they love them too. It is an honor to have it be for the sandy ground during this Black History Month celebration, a celebration not only of the Afro-American communities, but of all New Yorkers. When I became commissioner, I voted to make middle class, working class, and community of color a priority and highlight those areas that are too often underserved by government. And this is what this mayor is also committed to do. Celebrating the sandy ground today is a perfect sample of how we can uplift these communities. With this vote, the legacy of the sandy ground community that the mayor just discussed will live on for many generations to come. As I said last week when we took the maiden voyage on the beautiful New Orleans Ferry, the sandy ground and all 3 New Orleans class boats are larger, more modern, and better equipped for extreme weather than the existing fleet. The boats are all equipped with comfortable seating and phone charging outlets, as well as an upper deck promenade that serves as an outdoor walking track for riders. I can wait for you all to see when we take a tour. And now, I would like to dedicate the plaque, one of the many that you will see inside the ferry, but the most important one, the inscription on this plaque reads as follows: Sandy Ground, Staten Island community founded by free people of color, circa 1828, named for the sandy soil at its location on the Staten Island South Shore. Sandy Ground is the oldest continuously settled free Black community in the United States. In the 19th century, it served as a stop on the Underground Railroad. The Staten Island Ferry is proud to honor the history of the African-American community of Staten Island, New York City, and the whole nation for sharing its name. Finally, I want to offer a word of thanks to the entire team of the Staten Island Ferry who are hosting us here today. Deputy Commissioner John Garvey lead the ferry and is here. John, thank you for the leadership that you're showing with the whole crew that we have here. And finally, I also want to recognize the person at DOT who played a major role running most of the pieces related to operation, my Deputy Commissioner Margaret Fujoni, who is here today. With that, muchas gracias a todos. Un día importante junto con el alcalde. Vinimos a reconocer lo que es una familia que fue la primera que se estableció en Staten Island, que representa la lucha por la libertad de la comunidad africana aquí. La lucha de la comunidad afroamericana es la lucha de cada uno de nosotros. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. A reminder that the mayor's schedule is tight today, so we're reminding all speakers to keep their remarks at 1 to 2 minutes. At this time, it is my great pleasure to introduce Julie Moody Lewis, a descendant of those first Sandy Ground settlers, as well as board president at the Sandy Ground Historical Society. Thank you for joining us, and would you please come up? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you to our supporters over the last 40 years. With your assistance, the Sandy Ground Historical Society, the organization of record, has educated and continues to educate the public about the history of Sandy Ground. We are listed on the National and State Registers of Historic Places. Sandy Ground, a free Black community, is included in the National Network of Freedom Trail. The Sandy Ground Historical Society holds the distinction of being the official site of Louis Napoleon, a conductor on the Underground Railroad. It was discovered that he lived in Sandy Ground. Sandy Ground was a safe haven for people of African descent seeking the promise of the American dream, including the right to all freedoms, the right to religion, occupation, and education. Having said that, the Sandy Ground Historical Society would like to thank the now Borough President, then Congressman Vito Fossella, for taking the time out of his schedule to visit the Sandy Ground Historical Society Museum. That day, he viewed our exhibits and toured the museum. More importantly, he embraced the history of our site. And he went on to nominate Sandy Ground to be included as part of the National Network to Freedom Trail. Thank you. The Sandy Ground Historical Society would like to thank Andrew Lanza for 40 years of his support, and also to thank Mr. Riley, Assemblyman, for his support. Last but not least, we'd like to thank our phenomenal Councilwoman, Debbie Rose, who took the initiative to begin the campaign to have the New York City Department of Transportation name a ferry boat after Sandy Ground. The ancestors owe you a debt of gratitude. These efforts and our continued efforts by our supporters ensures that the history of Sandy Ground will not be lost. Thank you to all of our supporters and members and board members who stand with us at every mile of our journey. Early maps of New York City before Staten Island was a part of, before Staten Island was a borough, it showed Harrisville, Africa, Little Africa, as a community. It is now more commonly known as Sandy Ground. Moses was a gardener who worked for wealthy white families here on Staten Island that lived in Manhattan. He and his brother moved to Staten Island and began a farming industry. They grew a variety of crops, but most importantly or notably, they introduced the strawberry crop to Staten Island. In Sandy Ground today, there is one street named after that Black family. That street is called Harris Lane, also known as Strawberry Lane. The Harrises understood the value of land and land ownership. Here is a listing of the properties that the Harrises began to purchase in 1850. The oyster fishermen would come up from Maryland and work with the white oyster fishermen to seed and harvest those oysters. They also would come back and forth from Maryland to Staten Island. When their freedom was being challenged, they decided they would move their families and settle in Staten Island around 1850. Around that time, the Rossville Amy Zion Church had been formed. That church is still active in the community today. As a result of our continued efforts to educate the public about Sandy Ground, working with the New York City public school system from elementary school to middle school to high school throughout the city university system. Most notably, the Macaulay's Honors Program has been to Sandy Ground on several occasions. Parts of the city university have been a part of the Sandy Ground education experience. Having said that, the New York City Department of Education has announced that they will be including the history of Sandy Ground as part of the curriculum. This, to us, is just a sign that all the efforts that we have put out to make sure that that history is not lost, those efforts have not been in vain. With that, we thank the person who developed the curriculum that we've used over the 40 years in the school systems. That's Jerry Dowd, who is an educator, and all of the other people who have supported us along the way. Today, this boat is being launched in water that we know symbolizes life. Back in the 1800s, during the time of the Underground Railroad, those waters were used to ensure that people would have the opportunity to freedom. Sandy Ground and all of its descendants are so proud and happy today for what our ancestors had in mind for us and our children and to the nation. It is such a pleasure. Such a pleasure. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, let me show this. And here again, this is one of the tools we use when we go into the schools.
Love it, love it, love it.
I have one for you. Don't leave without it.
Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome anytime.
Here you go. Here you go. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. That's okay. Thank you, Julie. I know that we have some elders here who are direct descendants of the earliest Sandy Ground settlers. Can we ask those descendants with us here today to stand up or raise their hands so that we can honor them with a round of applause? Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Captain Zita Merchant, New York Sector Commander at the U.S. Coast Guard. As the mayor mentioned, Captain Merchant made history as the first African-American woman to run this post. In fact, she's the first black woman commander of any U.S. port. Yay. Yes. The Staten Island Ferry works hand in glove with the Coast Guard to ensure that the country's busiest ferry system, which carries 70,000 people every day, keeps all of our riders safe. Captain Merchant, we are so proud of you being here today. Please come on up.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mayor Adams, Commissioner Rodriguez, Mrs. Lewis, and the many distinguished guests that are with us today. Thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this historic occasion. As Captain of the Port and Commander of Coast Guard Sector New York, I could not be more excited to have reviewed the construction plans of the trio of Alice-class vessels. But even more significantly, as a member of the military, an African-American, a woman, and a resident of our wonderful Staten Island community, I was even more inspired by their namesakes. And with that said, it gives me great pride to be a part of this commissioning of Sandy Ground. With the naming and dedication, yes, it definitely deserves a round of applause. With the naming and dedication of this impressive vessel, along with the adoption of the entire state-of-the-art Otis-class fleets of ferries, which have already received international acclaim. Again, these ferries have already received international acclaim across the world. New York City has not only decided to honor the legacy of the diverse community that calls Staten Island home, but it also shows their passionate commitment to the secure and safety of our busiest ferry service in the nation. Again, Staten Island is the busiest ferry service in the nation. But on behalf of the Coast Guard, I am honored to work alongside the New York City Department of Transportation to ensure that millions of New Yorkers who commute within these cutting-edge ferries do so knowing that they are safe and secure within this complex and consequential port, one of the most consequential ports in the nation. But on a personal level, as someone who appreciates the significance of Sandy Ground community establishment and the rich maritime history, I am honored to stand with the city to trump Sandy Ground's story to the world. As millions of people from all backgrounds will ride these beautiful ferries, learn about the history, and they will be better for it. So Bravo Zulu to the entire team here. We work with them closely every day, and I cannot wait to see Sandy Grounds underway in the port and with this legacy serving the city of New York. Thank you again for allowing me to be here. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Captain Merchant. I would like to thank all of our distinguished speakers and guests for joining us today at the commissioning ceremony of the Sandy Ground. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to turn this back to you for questions and answers.
Thank you. We want to also acknowledge the presence of Assembly Member Michael Kuzik, Assembly Member Charles Falls, and City Council Sabina Brooke Powers. But I would be remiss if we did not allow our former council member to say a few words. This is your vision. You let it actualize, and so please, former council member Debbie Rose.
Wow. I'm not prepared to speak, but I just want to say this is such an important day. This is such an important day because the history of our ancestors, the very rich history of our ancestors, has arrived out of the dark and has become a part of the very important fabric of New York City's life, as it was back in the 17 and 1800s, when it was a vital, thriving community of oystermen, farmers, and entrepreneurs. This history was one that wasn't told, that was very important. It played a role in the history of this nation, and for this to be now manifested in a ferry boat that thousands of Staten Islanders, New Yorkers, and people from all over the world, tourists, ride every day. This is such a fitting memorial to them. People will get to know the story of Sandy Ground. And it just feels to me like all the fruits of their labor, their love, and their struggles are now have been manifested in something that contributes to the well-being, the economy, and the history of New York City. So I am so grateful. I am so thankful. I'm thankful to the Sandy Ground Historical Society, to the descendants who, because of your tenacity and your fight, you have not let this story die. And it is an important story in New York City history. So I am so thankful. I am so thankful that our story is being told today and will, in perpetuity, as long as DOT, the Coast Guard, and our wonderful crew members allow it to run. So thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, so much. Thank you.
We'll open it to on topic.
Anyone has on-topic questions?
Good. Okay, let's do a few. You have an on topic you want to? Yeah. Off topic. Let's do a few off topics before we do the tour.
With the announcement of the masks no longer being required outside schools coming Monday, vaccination will obviously become even more important. So I'm wondering, why hasn't our administration released school-by-school breakdown of vaccination rates, even though the comptroller has requested it?
It's news to me that the controller has requested it and it has not been released. So let me check into that and I'll answer that question.
Could I do one more?
Of course you can.
As you may have seen the other day, we reported about their chief of staff, Frank Jerome, and his business ties to a friend of yours, John Petrosian. When you were speaking about your relationship to Mr. Petrosian, you described it as a mentorship, as a purely social relationship. With your chief of staff, it's a bit different, and your press team has admitted that Mr. Petrosian has recommended clients to Mr. Jerome. This is in spite of the fact that Mr. Petrosian has a criminal history involved in this type of business that they're now involved in. Do you think this is appropriate for the chief of staff of City Hall to be relying on advice from a felon looking at clients in a business that he was convicted of crime?
So I want to do that in layers because it's important to do it in layers because you asked a lot. One, someone who committed a crime answered to that crime and either served their time, paid their fine, or the court acknowledged their misgiving and they acknowledged them. I don't hold that against them, like New Yorkers did not hold it against me when I committed a crime, and I'm now the mayor of the city of New York. And so if you do something that's wrong, you don't give them a lifetime sentence for it. That's what's beautiful about this amazing country. So in the days that we're talking about prison reform, we're talking about clean slate legislation, we're talking about giving people second chances, that is what I believe in. When my chief of staff became the chief of staff, he turned over all of his business dealings the appropriate way, the same way Michael Bloomberg did. What happened to his business agreements prior to being my chief of staff is really something that I am not accountable for. What he does as my chief of staff, he will live up to the highest standard I expect from all of my staffers and employees. How are you, Marsha? Yes. Yes. Well, so, let me do that in layers. The first layer is that I am, just really excited and happy that these young babies are going to be able to go out and play without masks. We're going to continue to evolve into a safe place to return to the normality that we all are looking for. Every morning I meet with my healthcare professionals. They're giving me the numbers. We're going to follow the science and make sure that we can get our offices open appropriately, our businesses open appropriately, and all of us want to get these masks off our faces, but we have to do it in a safe way. I can't go back to closing down the city. And within the next few weeks, you're going to see many of these mandates dissipate. And I am encouraged that New Yorkers did the right thing. They followed the rules. None of us liked it, but we followed the rules. We got vaccinated. We wore our mask. We did social distancing. And so when my doctors tell me, Eric, it's good to peel back another layer, we're going to pull back another layer. Heck yes. I am so tired of wearing these masks. I walk past friends every day. I almost forgot what they look like. And so, yes, I want to get back to a maskless city, but we don't want to do it and be reckless in our anticipation. So to me, this is a Heinz moment. Anticipation is killing me. Yes. I'm really angry. A robbery in itself is a traumatizing event. The person was just brutal. And, I often hear, Marsha, people want to lean into the long-term plan of dealing with not allowing the theaters of violence to happen, which is important. And I talk about it all the time. But darn it, we need to deal with those who are on our streets right now that are dangerous, that are violent, and have a total disregard. And I'm not going to surrender that. A woman taking the train should not be struck in the head with a hammer. And for repeatedly, and for us to believe that dangerous people like that in some corners that we need to say because they're in pain, they should inflict pain. I don't subscribe to that. We need to catch him. He needs to be incarcerated. And whomever is causing violence on our streets and our subways, while we give them the emotional help they need, we need to get them off our streets. What's your last question before we bounce?
Members of the LGBTQ community are asking why they should accept the views that three of your appointees have evolved and why the capacity is going to disqualify them from their office.
Well, you know, first of all, that community is extremely vast. We have about 700,000 people who are part of the LGBTQ plus community. And they know me. They know when I voted for marriage, advocated for marriage. Diane Savino and I were on the floor fighting for it. They knew that when I took that vote, I was told that if you vote for marriage, you will be banned for houses of worship in the city. I took the vote anyway. They knew I stood up for gender. They knew as a cop I stood up for those runaway LGBTQ plus youth. They know my strength around transgenders. I have a history of standing up for the community. And many of the community members called me and said, Eric, we know who you are and we support you. And so are there those who think differently? That's what New York is about. There are different views and different opinions. But I do know when marriage was passed, many people are comfortable now talking about it, but that was not the reality in the city and country. My brother-in-law, as I shared with Marsha, would not allow me back in his church. But he changed his mind. He said, I was wrong, Eric. And others stated they were wrong. We have to learn to allow people to evolve. And the best converter are those who were converted. The three people I brought in, they know what I stand for. They know what I'm going to fight for. We are not going to discriminate against any New Yorker. And so those who wanted to voice their concerns, I welcome that because I voiced my concern. I protested more than anyone in this city when I thought something was wrong. I'm going to meet with the community again, sit down with them, but I have to move the city forward, and we have to evolve as a city. Who we were is not who we are, and we have to be open to that. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, if everybody can just please wait for a moment. At this time, I'd like to ask Mayor Adams